This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Brandon Andrus Green.
Welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast Live. Are you in need of a therapist, trainer, or consultant who specializes in supporting male victims? Well, one may be closer than you think. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing your good neighbor, Stephen Procopio. Stephen, how's it going?
It's going great, and I so appreciate this contact we have today, Brandon.
Oh, I agree. And we're so excited to learn all about you and your work supporting male victims and the training and consulting that you provide. Will you tell us a little bit about your work as a therapist, trainer, and consultant, particularly for male victims?
Yeah, so my expertise is working with males with a sexual exploitation history, which can be anywhere from childhood sexual abuse, rape, domestic violence, and also the extra specialty for me is working with men who have been sex trafficked. So I had the honor of about 18 years ago now I founded the first freestanding project for sex trafficked boys in the United States. So I've been on a roll ever since then, and I've really had an opportunity to run a program here in Boston, but also after I completed that program, I've done a lot of work nationally and internationally, consulting with various non-government agencies and government agencies on how to develop programs for boys that have a history of sex trafficking.
Wow. And so how did you get into this work in the first place?
Well, about 17 years ago, I was a faculty advisor at the Boston University Graduate School of Social Work. And there's a group of about 28 social workers who were assigned to work as a conduit between the field education department at the school and the field centers that these students were at. So we each got about 5 students. So once a year, the dean of the field ed department invited one of the students to give a presentation on their work. And so a colleague of mine, Lisa Goblack Grace, who had a program called My Life, My Choice, was a program working with sex trafficked girls under the age of 18. So while I was listening to this, I'm kind of thinking, what about the boy? And she did say to me, I want to say I just work with girls. We kind of sort of think it happens to boys. It's less than 10%. It's only the gay boys, and they're doing it of their own free will. And when I heard that, I went ballistic internally. I mean, I behaved in the classroom, but I just said, having worked with sexual exploitation around childhood sexual abuse, I don't know anyone who's sexually abused who are out there doing it of their own free will. So to make a very long story short, I took her out for a long lunch. She goes, there's just no programs for boys. I stand by the position that I have. And here comes the clincher, one sentence. She said to me, if you think it's such an issue, why don't you do something about it yourself? So I tell people that's where I had my Oprah moment, because Oprah always says, if you find a passion, go for it. So that's how I started the program. So it took me about 5 years. There was no research done except for one group in Canada, Susan McIntyre, who had done a called Under the Radar, which did a comprehensive study on sex trafficked boys. And there was just a lot of pushback, but I was able, after 5 years of a lot of hard work, to get some seed money at an agency that allowed me to try and start the program. And that's how it all started.
It's amazing. And you kind of already just answered this, but I'm hoping you can dig down a little deeper. What are some of the common myths or misconceptions about male victims that you encounter in your work?
Well, I think in the human trafficking community, there's a lot of gender bias and homophobia that's attached to it. So a lot of the women working in the field back in those days, and to some extent even now, but back in those days, that it was just a woman-girl issue, that boys don't get exploited, that males are perpetrators, not victims. And so that scenario just kept feeding itself as we go along. And, there was no, like the Me Too campaign that supported women, men did not have that. And there's a lot of boys and men who, because of the narrative around women and girls, didn't have a connection to their victimization as being legitimate. And for a lot of, I would say, boys under the age of 18, when they were trafficked, had a lot of shame and guilt. And if the offender was a male, they didn't want to disclose for fear of being considered gay boys. And so I have to stress that for girls as well, being sex trafficked has nothing to do with one's sexual orientation. It's a totally separate phenomenon. So I think, and then there's a lot of disclosure issues against disclosure, because a lot of the adult males that I now work with in my private practice, when they did decide to disclose, were blamed for the abuse, that they were males, so they should have stopped it. So I have males that are partnered and married for a long time that never even disclosed to their wives or their partners because of the pressure not to disclose. So it's a very complex psychosocial issue that men are still going through. It's better than when I first started, but we still have a long way to go yet.
So are a lot of these people self-identifying as victims of human trafficking, or is this something that they're discovering after meeting with you?
Well, when I ran my first program here in Boston, we got our referrals from Department of Children and Families. And basically what I did is that boys, when I talked to the social workers, they would say, well, boys aren't disclosing, so we can't send anybody to you. And I said, well, we have to look at other factors that may indicate sexual exploitation. So we looked a lot around behavioral indicators, boys that are totally withdrawn, they don't have any friends, they're always quiet, they seem depressed, they seem anxious, and all the way over the spectrum to a lot of acting out kinds of behaviors. So that was one thing I asked them to take a look at. And then there's other kind of issues around, behaviors that may get exacerbated by connections to older men. So if they observe the boys' behavior with older men, that's definitely another indicator. So when I first started getting referrals from Department of Children and Families, not all the boys came to me after necessarily a disclosure, just based on the behavioral indicators. And I had a staff of 3 people, and we each had about 5 kids. We saw them like 2 to 3 times a week. We developed, this work is very relational. You have to build a relationship. And one of my clients, who I always say was one of my more favorite clients, it took him we knew he was getting exploited, but it took him about 16 months before he felt safe enough to disclose. So all that preliminary work about establishing relationships of trust, because these kids do not trust adult figures at all. They've learned not to trust adults. And so they need to have some kind of mentor model. I consider it almost like a big brothers, big sisters type of model that we use just to be there for the kids. And at some point they'll feel safe, and then they'll disclose. And then other kids would talk about their experiences, and I had to point out to them that in fact was sexual exploitation. So we had to do a lot of educational work around identifying that for them, because they had no awareness that that's what it was.
Now, are you also providing training and consulting for other entities and organizations, or is this primarily just one-on-one?
I do. I've more so up until the pandemic. I did a lot of traveling around this country, speaking at conferences on the topic. And then I got pulled into Canada. So the last couple of 3 years, I've been doing work in Canada with the Ottawa Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And I've been doing trainings around that country as well. And so I continue to do that. Most of that now is done virtually because people aren't traveling as much. But I'm still doing a lot of consultation in that area. And then there's another program. The program that I started in Boston is still operational. And then I had left that after a period of time to do consulting work and private practice work. And I'm sort of working with another agency here in Boston to start a program for boys there because they have an interest in that.
Well, how are you usually connecting with these people or organizations that need your services and training?
Mostly word of mouth. If I go to a conference and people hear me, then they invite me to their state or their organization. So a lot of it is word of mouth. I've done a lot of connections through LinkedIn. So I have to say, after 17 years, I'm pretty well known within this country.
So what changes do you see in these men or boys when they finally start feeling safe enough to talk about what happened to them?
Well, that's a really good question because it's so different depending on the male. There are men that I've worked with that after a period of time feel like it's too much to handle and they want a break from therapy. So we stop. And, it's very important for these males to feel that they're in control of what's happening for them. So there's no pressure to handle therapy any more than they feel like they can. So if they want to take a little, instead of weekly, if you want to go every other week, you want to do once a month, I'm very much open to doing that with them. And then there's a period of time where they say, okay, I've done some preliminary work. I need to go back and just sit with this for a while and then come back at some point when I feel like I'm ready. It really challenges one's developmental stage of life because especially if and so I want to say this is true for girls too, between 70 and 80% of kids that are trafficked have a prior sexual abuse history. So it's sexual exploitation on a continuum. And it's really quite a bit to handle psychologically, but it also affects the developmental process of a person. And that really does take a lot of work. So a lot of my adult men, for example, have said that their adolescence was robbed and taken from them. And so they feel that gap. It's like a part of their lives was removed of their early childhood. Then they were removed of their adolescence and they were thrown into adulthood. And it's hard to make that transition when they didn't have a productive, healthy adolescence, but they feel like they've missed out on so much. So there's a lot of grieving that goes with this, and a lot of sadness. And I'm not saying that someone has to be in therapy every week for the rest of their lives, but at least therapy at integral stages of life, especially during different developmental stages, is pretty critical to help you make that move from young adulthood to middle age to older, and so it's an ongoing process.
Stephen, what's one important thing you want our listeners to really remember about supporting male victims?
I think what we need to to remember is men are victims too. And it's like when we, interesting, one wife of a man, I spoke to one of my clients' wives who wanted some basic information. And after, he disclosed to her and she wanted to, and he asked me to speak with her. Her remark to me was very telling. She goes, now I know why he was so quiet. Now I know why he lacked intimacy with me. Now I know why he drank so much beer at night when he came home from work. So there's this revelation of, I cannot stand the term boys will be boys, because there's something behind that, or men will be men, or the expectation that the man's not going to be intimate. He's going to drink beer and he's going to be socially isolated. There's something behind all of that. So I think it's really interesting to know when, if you're in a same-sex relationship or heterosexual relationship with a male, you have to really consider how they operate in the world. And men aren't just being men. There's got to be something that's going on behind that. And it's worth more assessment and evaluation.
How can our listeners learn more about your work and get in touch with you?
Well, they can go on my webpage. It's www.Stephen with a V, the letter L as in Louis, Procopio, Procopio.com. So that's www.StephenLProcopio.com. And it gives a whole host of information of how to reach me, but all the work that I've done, articles that I've written, and all the presentations that I've done. So it's fairly comprehensive.
It's awesome. Well, Stephen, I really appreciate you being on the show. You mean a lot to me. I appreciate all the work you're doing for males, and we wish you the best moving forward.
Brandon, thank you so very much. It was great to see you again.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnptulsa.com. That's gnptulsa.com. Or call 918-301-6356.